This shloka has two meanings. On the one hand, it's a devotional shloka about Krishna, and on the other hand, it also encrypts 31 digits of pi. Here, take a look.
As you can see from the translation, it is one of those many shlokas that are there in the praise of Lord Krishna. But there is a secret here. If you take ka, ta, pha and replace them by 1 and so on as is shown in this table, then this particular shloka is actually the encoded value of pi up to 31 decimal places.
Gopi bhagya madhuvrata shringi shodadhi sandhiga khala jivita khatava galahala rasandhara.
What makes this shloka truly mind-blowing is the literary genius involved in encoding 31 digits of pi into 4 verses that is melodious and has a coherent meaning about Sri Krishna. These types of metaphors and symbols are very different from what you learn about in English class. And so if you want to understand the meaning of ancient literature beyond just the shallow layers, you need to first learn about how our ancestors thought about metaphors and symbols and why they used them in the first place. That's what we're going to cover in this video. If you want to actually decode the shloka, which I highly recommend you do, there's a worksheet in the description below. With that, let's get started. Now, let's do something interesting. Let's use the vocabulary from Advaita Vedanta to explain what's going on with this encryption. You can think of a metaphor or symbol as Maya because it hides the truth under an illusion. In Advaita, this truth is the all-pervasive Brahman. But in this context, it is a core information that is encrypted within the metaphor or symbol. In both cases, in order to experience this underlying truth, you must lift the veil of Maya. In Advaita, you do this through yoga. Over here, you do it with the decryption key. If you take this framework and apply it to this shloka, here's what you get. The 31 digits of pi is like Brahman because it is the fundamental truth of this shloka. The Sanskrit alphabets are like Maya because it hides the truth under an illusion. And using Katapayadi Sankhya to decrypt the shloka is like the process of yoga because it eliminates the Maya and allows us to experience the underlying truth of the shloka, that is the number pi. And so, to a normal person who doesn't know Katapayadi Sankhya, all they see is the illusion of Maya. There is no 3.1415 hidden within these verses. The people who think so are the delusional ones in their eyes. But for you and I, we know that's not the case. We know that if you pierce through the Maya using Katapayadi Sankhya, you will liberate the true meaning of the shloka. You will get 31 digits of pi, a universal constant underlying the fabric of reality, the Sat of Sanatana Dharma. You know, what's really interesting is that in Advaita Vedanta, when you actually do use yoga to lift the veil of Maya and experience yourself as Brahman in its purest form, you don't just experience the truth of reality, but there's also a profound feeling of love and bliss that comes along with it. And I feel that love and bliss when I decrypt metaphors and symbols too. To me, it's a lot like yoga. You're seeing through the Maya of metaphors and witnessing the truth of Brahman itself. It feels like the potential of truth is being liberated from the chains of ignorance and ego, not just within the shloka, but also within each of us as interpreters of poetry. If you feel the same way, let me know down in the comments below. Now, the question is, why did our ancestors encrypt 31 digits of pi in a devotional shloka? Why not just write the number without using a complicated Katapayadi Sankhya decryption key? Well, the answer to this touches upon a standard practice used amongst the rishis in which they used poetry and culture to store information in humanity's collective memory so that it survives over time. And let's just take a quick example. Suppose you were an ancient rishi who discovered the value of pi and wanted the number to survive 1,000 years into the future because you understood how important it really is. What would you do to maximize the probability of its survival? A. Hope that people memorize the 31 digits generation after generation for thousands of years. Remember, they don't have the internet. Or B. Encrypt it into a melodious song about an entertaining story that's taught in schools, celebrated in festivals, sung about in temples, and most importantly, transferred from one generation to the next. The answer is probably both, but if I were to choose, I'd lean towards B. I would use culture as a surrogate to propagate important information into the future. And guess what? That's what our ancestors did. They identified the fact that culture is transferred from one generation to the next with minor variations and thought, hey, culture has already survived for thousands of years. If we just encrypt information into it, it's bound to survive for another thousands of years. And so what did they do? One, they did encrypt information into poetry, stories, rituals, the stone of temples. And two, they established institutions to ensure cultural knowledge and traditions are passed down from one generation to the next. And by doing so, society inadvertently stored important information into the future, serving like a time capsule of knowledge. Of course, there's much more to religion than just preserving information, but what I'm talking about here is a very important component that we forget far too often. And frankly, it's leading to a lot of confusion when it comes to understanding culture. And I'm going to tell you why. You see, the shloka is a lot like this ambiguous image. From one perspective, it's a rabbit, and from the other perspective, it's a duck. The two meanings are completely independent of each other, yet both meanings are stored in one image, one distribution of colors along a 2D plane. The same applies to the shloka, which has two independent meanings, the poetic descriptions about Krishna and the 31 digits of pi. But the problem we face in society today is most of society is stuck in one interpretation. It's almost like only being able to see the rabbit and not being able to see the duck. And so we're left with an incomplete understanding of ancient culture because we're unable to identify its design to have ambiguous interpretations. With tools like Karanapaddhati Sankhya, the ambiguous nature of ancient culture becomes much more clear. But here's where things get very interesting. When you really think about it, society doesn't need to understand both interpretations for them to carry forward into the future. The poem's significance as a devotional prayer to Sri Krishna is sufficient for a parent to teach their children and inculcate the habit of reciting the shloka every day. When he grows older, he teaches the shloka to his children, and they teach it to their children, and the cycle repeats itself for hundreds of years. And so although it survived because of their bhakti towards Sri Krishna, they inadvertently preserved the value of pi as well. You know, in my view, that's what's happened with a lot of ancient culture. We've passed on culture from one generation to the next for thousands of years for the purpose of bhakti and culture, but we've also inadvertently served as nodes in a large intergenerational and decentralized network designed to preserve information through time. And that's what we've done. We have successfully preserved lots of information that our ancestors embedded and encrypted in ancient culture. And today, when you and I use tools like Karanapaddhati Sankhya to lift the veil of Maya and liberate the true meaning of ancient literature, if you really think about it, we're actually unlocking a great time capsule of knowledge that millions of our ancestors worked tirelessly to preserve for thousands of years.